Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my week 1 fantasy football rankings. I'm going to put them on the screen 1 through 12 starting at quarterback, and then I'm just going to talk about specific players you might have tough decisions on. Okay, so first let's talk about the Thursday night game that went down last night between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Fantasy football, slugfest in that, they scored all kinds of points on both sides of the ball. So if you had anybody playing in that game, you were happy unless you played Mike Evans. And I'm a little concerned about Mike Evans now heading, deeper into the season. We thought that his talent would really show and put himself above Antonio Brown and maybe even Chris Godwin in that, target share range. But even when they got towards the goal line, you saw Brady looking towards Gronk and not Mike Evans in week 1. I wouldn't panic if you're a Mike Evans owner, but obviously you're not thrilled with the result last night. But you did see Antonio Brown get targeted quite a bit. I had him on a bench in one of my leagues, and, that was clearly the wrong call there. But Chris Godwin, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper had, a historically good game. I believe he was targeted 16 times. He had over 10 catches, over 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He finished with 38 fantasy points on the week. So if you started Amari Cooper, you feel really good about that. Other than those players, Ronald Jones did terrible. He had a fumble and had negative fantasy points to finish the game. It did look like Leonard Fournette was getting most of the run, so that is really, really, really interesting to me. He looked like the clear lead back. Even before the fumble, Arians was putting Leonard Fournette out there quite a bit. And as far as Gio Bernard, he was there on third downs, sometimes, but he didn't have the impact that I expected. The surprise player for me was Rob Gronkowski, 8 receptions for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. I definitely wasn't projecting that for him going into this game. So, the Buccaneers have all kinds of weapons. It's really going to be probably a different guy every game that, comes out and surprises with a touchdown. But, if you're a Chris Godwin owner, if you're an Antonio Brown owner, you feel good. But Mike Evans, I would be very, very concerned. I wouldn't even buy low right now if, you think this is a fluke and Mike Evans is going to have, much better games along the way, which he will, but his upside is just capped by having Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown on the field with him. And I totally skipped the quarterback position in this game, but Tom Brady and Dak, they lit it up. So this was a game with a pretty high projected point total. Tom Brady going up against, a pretty suspect Dallas secondary, but I think the Dallas defense showed that they can make some plays and turn the ball over, and they're not the same terrible defense that they were last year. Micah Parsons was all over the field, and quite frankly, Tampa Bay didn't have any running lanes, so they shut down the run pretty good. And Dallas's defense looks like they're going to be much, much improved as opposed to their historically bad defense last year. But Brady ends up with a good game, throwing 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, over 300 yards passing. Same for Dak. Dak goes over 400 yards, throws 3 touchdowns and a pick. But again, if you have any of these pieces in this game, you feel great about it. Another guy that I didn't bring up is Ezekiel Elliott, but I think we saw that he was going to have, a pretty poor game from the beginning just because Tampa Bay's run defense isn't going to change. Vita Vea, plugs up 3 holes in and of himself. So not surprised Zeke had a bad game. I wouldn't panic if you're a Zeke owner. I guess he would be a buy low, but Tampa Bay is going to shut down most running backs in the NFL. Okay, so let's start with the quarterback position. My number 1 quarterback of the week is Lamar Jackson, so not going to have too many questions about him. He's playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who pretty much is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So I'm smashing Lamar Jackson. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets, a pair of throwing touchdowns and a pair of rushing touchdowns. Some tough decisions that you might have to make. Josh Allen against Pittsburgh. I don't think he's going to do too well, but he is my quarterback 5 on the week. Now, this was filmed after the Thursday night game, so I did have Brady at 4, and he ended up throwing for 4 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. So pretty good call there. He'll finish in the top 10 on the week. But the bad call is Dak Prescott. I had him all the way down at 11, and he ended up throwing for 400 yards and pretty much tearing through that Tampa Bay Buccaneer defense. So Having him at 11 is probably a miss, but I don't fault myself for the process. The Tampa Bay defense, was elite last year, and I think they're still elite. They did lose their slot guy, their slot corner in the game, so I think that had something to do with it. They were kind of picking on man coverage the entire game. So if you have Dak, you should feel really good about him because that's probably going to be one of his toughest matchups all year. Now, according to my rankings, I would have started guys like Tannehill, Matthew Stafford over him, and that was, like I said, just the process of Tampa Bay having a really tough defense. Ryan Tannehill I have all the way up at 8 this week just because he's going to be playing against a Cardinals defense that, did give it up last year, and they lost Patrick Peterson but gained Malcolm Butler. I don't think that's it's pretty much a horizontal move, but their pass rush should be pretty good, so we'll see just how effective that Cardinals defense is going to be against Tennessee. Another guy in these rankings I would talk about is Jalen Hurts. I've got him all the way up at number 6. He's playing Atlanta, who's absolutely terrible, and Jalen Hurts should be able to get it done on the ground as well. So I love Jalen Hurts going up against that terrible, terrible Atlanta front seven, and they have no one on the back end either. So I love Jalen Hurts this week. Russell Wilson is a guy I'm looking at pivoting if I can, just because the Colts defense is very, very solid. But in the back end of their defense, the secondary, it's not too great. And I think DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett might be able to take advantage there. We've got Justin Herbert all the way down at 10, going up against that Washington football defense. Sorry, I don't have him at 10. I have him all the way down at 12. So barely a QB1. If you drafted Justin Herbert, you're starting him. So I've got him at Washington. And that's going to do it for the quarterback position. There are a couple streamers that I like and that are not listed here, like Matt Ryan. He's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, a terrible, terrible secondary. Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley should be able to show out there. So Matt Ryan as a streamer I like quite a bit. Kirk Cousins, who's going to be a streamer pretty much all season long. He gets it done in the touchdown department and throws quite a bit of yards as well. So he'll be playing Cincinnati. I also like him in that game. So if you have other options that you don't feel too good about, Russell Wilson against the Colts, maybe consider starting Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan in that situation. Okay, so let's get right into this running back position for week 1. The number one consensus one is obviously Christian McCaffrey going up against the New York Jets. With McCaffrey's volume, he's probably going to be ranked 1 every single week, but he also pairs that up with a matchup against the New York Jets, who are a bottom half defense against the run and don't really have anybody to cover him in the passing game either. So Christian McCaffrey is a smash play as usual. You're always going to play guys like him. Guys I have higher than consensus would be Joe Mixon. I have at 5 going up against Minnesota. I think he has a really good game, mainly through the air. I think that now that Giovanni Bernard is gone, we're going to see an uptick in Joe Mixon's passing game. I think he's going to catch quite a bit of passes in this game and, score through the ground as well. Minnesota's run defense doesn't necessarily scare me. I've got Eckler at 8 against the Washington football team. Now, Eckler did actually practice today, and today's Friday, September 10th. He did get in a limited practice with that hamstring injury, but I still don't feel great about Austin Eckler. But if you drafted him, you drafted him in the first or early second round, so you have to play him. There's no way I'm sitting Austin Eckler if he's active in this week. If you have other options to pivot to, I'd probably start guys like Raheem Mostert, Clyde Edwards-Helaire over him, but you more than likely don't have the option to pivot from the RB1 on your team. Guys I am higher on, like I said, Raheem Mostert plays the Detroit Lions. Even if he only sees those 10 to 12 touches, he's going to take one of them for 60 yards. So I am really high on Raheem Mostert. I've got him at number 15 on the week. Love Miles Sanders this week as well, going up against that Atlanta Falcons secondary and terrible front seven. So if you have Miles Sanders, I am putting him in my lineup, confident RB2. Maybe even an RB1 on the week. James Robinson at number 12 going against Houston. No one on that defense that's going to stop the run. Love James Robinson this week. I have Gus Edwards in my rankings, but that was before the ACL injury. I'm not going to have any Ravens running back ranked in the top 20 going up against the Vegas Raiders, after Gus Edwards tore his ACL and Marcus Peters also tore his ACL. So, the Ravens are really going through it. I'm going to have to replace Gus Edwards And when I post the video, you'll see who I edited in there. So guys, I'm lower on than consensus. Like I had Ezekiel Elliott all the way down at 20, so I knew he was going to have a rough game against that Tampa Bay front seven, and I didn't feel great about him. I've got Carson all the way down at 18, going up against that Indianapolis front four, so I don't feel great about Carson in that game. I think they're going to be getting it done through the air, not on the ground against the Colts. And I have Saquon Barkley all the way down at 17 against Denver. He was officially listed as questionable today, so that's just volume concerns for me. I know Saquon doesn't need a lot of touches to, have a good fantasy day, but I've got him all the way down at my RB 17. Next up, we have the wide receiver position, and my number one consensus wide receiver for this week is going to be DeAndre Hopkins, going up against one of the worst secondaries in the league in the Tennessee Titans. When you think of the Tennessee Titans secondary, there's really no one who comes to mind besides Kevin Byard, and he's not someone who's going to lock up man to man. So DeAndre Hopkins, number one, in one of those games that projects to be a shootout between the Cardinals and the Titans. I love DeAndre Hopkins this week. Some other guys I'm higher than consensus. I love Calvin Ridley at number 4, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, they've got Darius Slay, who's a pretty solid corner, but he's at the decline of his career. You saw DK Metcalf, just tear him up last season. So love Calvin Ridley against Philly in a game that, again, projects to be a shootout, and Philly's just not as good on defense as they used to be. I have A.J. Brown at number 6 against the Arizona Cardinals. They should have just a great game, I think, against that Cardinal defense. Although they have pieces like J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, their linebacker core is pretty suspect in my opinion. I don't think Jordan Hicks is that great. Nobody that's a real run stuffer on that team, in my opinion. You've got Budda Baker and Byron Murphy in the back end, who are pretty solid in the secondary, but I think the Titans get it done. They're going to have to stack the box against Derrick Henry. So love A.J. Brown, love Julio Jones this week. I've got both of them in my top 12 at receivers. So really high on the Tennessee Titans. I've got Stephon Diggs all the way down at 8. Again, just in correlation with Josh Allen. I don't think they're going to have, this game where they score over 30 points against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who clearly have a lot to prove this season. Going down the ranks, I did have Chris Godwin at 12 against Dallas and Mike Evans at 13. That was clearly a mistake on my end. Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown have stepped into, the wide receiver 1 and 2, in my opinion. They're going to be the guys that get the most targets. If you're playing Mike Evans, you're hoping for touchdowns and big plays. That's kind of where I'm at this point. I did have CeeDee Lamb at 14, who ends up with, over 20 fantasy points. Love to see that. I've got Amari Cooper all the way down to 19. He's probably going to finish as a top 3 receiver on the week, so I need to see my process there. Amari Cooper is clearly the number 1, in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb dropped a lot of balls. He had more opportunities than what his score even said, but I think Amari Cooper is still the alpha in this offense. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Now moving on to easily the hardest position for me to try and judge for week 1, the tight end position. At number 1, there should be no surprise that it's Travis Kelce going up against the Cleveland Browns. It doesn't really matter who Travis Kelce's opponent is. He's the only tight end in the NFL who is the number 1 target and is going to get 10-plus targets a game. George Kittle, can fit into that category, but there's so many other weapons that the 49ers project to use much, much higher on Kelce. But Kittle should have a huge week against the Detroit Lions, who basically can't cover anybody. After you get to Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts should be smash plays this week. They've got great matchups, high projected point totals. I don't see how Mark Andrews doesn't have a great game in particular. Marquise Brown is going to be in the game, but he's always injured. He's coming in hurt. Rashad Bateman is starting on the IR, so Mark Andrews should get plenty of run in this game against the Raiders. The only thing that could happen to Mark Andrews is maybe they get up big and they game script him out and just running the football. But I don't think that's going to happen. I see at least 1 touchdown for Mark Andrews. Kyle Pitts should be – listen, get ready for the Kyle Pitts hype, because after week 1, people are going to be calling him, the best tight end of all time. I think he's going to have over 100 yards, maybe a touchdown against this Eagles secondary that can't guard anyone. And Kyle Pitts is too big, too strong, too fast. I think he's going to show his ability in week 1 of the season. Now, getting past Kyle Pitts, it gets tough. I've got Logan Thomas against the Los Angeles Chargers at 6. I just think that Ryan Fitzpatrick is gonna lean on him a little bit more than we think going into the season. I've got Hawkinson at 7 against the Niners. Don't particularly like starting him just because you're going to have Fred Warner or Jimmy Ward on him, and I think those guys will lock him up. Tyler Higbee at 8 for me against Chicago. I think Tyler Higbee is going to have a much, much bigger season than people drafted him at. He was a 12th round pick. I think Stafford is going to look for a third target. It could be Van Jefferson. It could be Deshaun Jackson, maybe even Tutu Atwell, but I would put my money on Tyler Higbee. Noah Fant is going to be playing this game against the New York Giants, so he is in play for me as a tight end 1. To round out my last 3, I've got Dallas Goedert, Robert Tonyan, and Jonnu Smith. The tight end position is really just a crapshoot. If you have a good feeling about any of these guys, just plug them in. If you don't have the top 5, just really get a feel for matchup, how that team did against tight ends last year. Noah Fant should have a pretty good game going in. But that's going to do it for my Week 1 Fantasy 2021 rankings. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I'm going to have my cornerback versus wide receiver matchup show tomorrow.
DaveJones.com